Yo, what it is, YouTube? It's your boy Nix coming back with another bullseye tutorial here today on the channel. I wanted to talk about tube channel strips. I noticed that usually when I do use a channel strip, it's like a SSLE, a G, or API. So I was like, hey, I'm gonna try out to use two different tube channel strips on this song that I have here. We're gonna go over all of that, but let's jump into the music right away. If you guys do have any more comments or questions or concerns, go ahead and drop it down below. Video ideas, I'm more than happy to get to it. Let's not waste no time and let's get to this music right away, right now. Let's go.
I still can't even feel, I can't feel. Girl, what's real? I've been lost inside my thoughts lately. I think that I've been going crazy. I can't think you're on my mind daily. My mom says, son, you're going crazy. Say I'm going crazy, toting 380.
All right, so that's the song that we have right here. So let's look at this right away. So originally when I was mixing the song, I was trying out the SSLE, what I usually use, but I wanted a smoothing characteristic. So we got to understand that different channel strips, also the components as well, any type of analog model plugin, like the components also contribute to the sound. It's not just one specific thing, you know what I mean? So that kind of made me stumble upon two different choices that I had. I had the soft tube channel strip, and I put it up against the Waves BB channel strip, the tube channel strip. So this is pretty interesting too. So let's look a little bit about the history and everything like that of these two things. So, in the beginning, a lot of those first consoles, they were actually tube consoles, which is very interesting. You had something like the EMI, the red console as well. So a lot of the first consoles were using tubes, and it's interesting, even microphones as well. Tubes have always been a very important part of audio, you know what I mean? Like when they were making like those first microphones, like the 47 and stuff like that, they used the tubes to actually dirty up the signal a little bit so it becomes more audible. Like the human ear is not used to a clean, quiet sound because that's not how life is. When you walk outside the door, you might hear cars moving, people chattering, feet moving, wind blowing. There's all types of these little noises and distortions in the actual like outside world that we hear that, when we are coming to making music, we can't forget about them. So that's what the tube, originally helped them do. And with the U47, it helped make everything become a little bit more audible. So that's like one of the first microphones. But one of the first consoles is like the red, and this one was used by the Beatles, pretty much in England. It's very interesting because the first consoles were tube, but then after a little bit of amount of time, solid state started coming in there because it was lower noise. So the tubes are pretty interesting as well. They do produce some noise, but they also have a very warming characteristic. The tubes are kind of like the soul of making music, like it's kind of like your heart. When a tube starts to get really warm and bright, it has a really rich kind of like, soulfulness, richness to it that, can't be replicated. But it's kind of like the human heart because, for example, when you get happy or you feel really good, like your heart starts to get warm, kind of like a tube. So I see tubes like the soul of making music. So, after that, you had something like this, which is the Helios 69 channel strip. Is very interesting because the Waves BB tube actually kind of looks like it. So I don't know if it's inspired by it or not, but I know Olympic Studios in England, Waves is from England, and Olympic Studios in England, maybe there's like a connection, there. But this is a solid state type of console. I know that Eddie Kramer, Jimi Hendrix engineer, he used to like to use these Pi compressors as well. That was like his bus compressor. But I ain't gonna lie, like this studio setup just looks so cool. Imagine that if you were sitting there and you press and play on that tape, and I know it probably would be a lot to maintain, but still it's pretty cool that they had something like this in like the Olympic Studios and everything like that. But the main reason why I was bringing that up is because like these tube channel strips, that's not something that you commonly see a lot with plugins, tube channel strips, when I'm thinking about it. Maybe there is some other ones that I'm not thinking about it, but it's pretty interesting though, considering like the first consoles were tubes and everything like that. We get all the benefits of the modern workflow and not having to worry about the noise, but also we don't have to worry about waiting for the tubes to heat up or anything like that. We can just go, like, you don't have to worry about any gear or upkeep. You can just use these plugins. So that's pretty cool. All right, so let's get to how it sounds. So the Waves BB2, pretty interesting. You have the drive right here, then you have the EQ and everything. Like it's kind of like a 3-band EQ. Kind of reminds me of like a Neve 1073, like where it has 2 shelves, one high, one low in a mid band. And then after that, you know, you have a little bit of compression, all that stuff. That's cool. Yeah, we're gonna look at that. And then you have like the soft tube, the tube channel strip. And it's interesting because it's got the CL1B. So, you know, this is something that's kind of like patched together type of situation where you got the pull tech and the CL1B at the bottom. I know y'all love the CL1B, so that's why I wanted to bring it to this video. So let's listen to both of them and kind of hear like like which one sounds better, you know, which one I ended up going with and why, the mindset. So let's go.
She say, where you been? Girl, I've been trying to hide it. I'm sorry I ain't called. I've been on my grind. I know you miss me, cause I miss you. We miss each other. But I'm getting money, shawty. We can't wait forever. We can't wait forever. It's always stormy weather. I was hoping that we could be better. I was hoping that we could stack cheddar. I don't care about haters, they envy. I'm J Mac, girl, no, I ain't friendly. I know all of these bitches want.
And that's the thing about tubes, understanding the components. The tubes just make it sound a little bit more bigger. And that's kind of coming down to something I like to call the harmonic density, the weight. Okay, so cool. Let's say that we have two bags, okay? I have a bag right here that's full of toilet paper, but the bag looks big, right? And then I also have a bag full of bricks. Right? So if I put two of those bags in there, right, and I tell you, oh yeah, you know, one of those bags has $1 million inside of it, which one you think it is? You're always gonna go to the one that looks more denser. Like, even though they might weigh the same amount, you know, bricks are just a lot more denser, a lot more compact and tight, so you kind of perceive it as bigger visually. But the same thing kind of applies to audio, I feel like, where when you start using tubes and, you know, you get some of that saturation for something like the drive, it adds some weight, it adds some tone. So maybe if you have skinny vocals, maybe you might want to use something like a tube channel strip or a tube EQ or anything that has the tube component inside of it. You know, Waves makes it pretty easy, but the tube component itself is pretty game to getting a little bit more weight and to not getting skinny, frail vocals. Okay, so then I used a little bit of EQ to boost the top, and then I went in there and what I did when I was mixing it, I boosted the mid. I found a nasty resonance and I pulled it out. You know, after that, you know, last thing I did is I used the low shelf as well, just to kind of balance out the bottom of the record. You know, a lot of the low end was coming from my background vocals a little bit, if you peep. So yeah, you know, something like that too. And I used a little bit of the gate and expanded just to really tighten it up. You know, I kind of see a gate kind of like real life. Like if somebody takes their hand and they put it around somebody's neck, they start talking a little bit more like this. And essentially that's what a gate does for me. You know, I don't see a gate like, oh, take out the background noise. I see a gate like can change the tone, change the way that the music is talking. You know what I mean? And I especially like to use that a lot on like my background vocals, just to make it sound a little bit more tight, a little bit more abrupt. So just to go back and forth really quickly, you know, with the pull tech, we all know what a pull tech is and we all know what a CL1B is, but something about the actual tonality. So sometimes you got to be able to listen to the tonality. And with the tube tech CL1B, it's pretty good. It lets you dial in a little bit more. But sometimes when you're mixing, you know, you got to go for something that is a little bit more simpler, something that's going to optimize you. You know, you got to understand, back in the day, what gave them an advantage when they was making music too is the fact that they did not have a bunch of options. You know, humanity, we was never optimized to have 1 million options. You know, option paralysis, that's always the problem nowadays. But with the Waves BB Tube, it just keeps it so simple and so relatable. And you just heard how, like, when he was hitting his notes and the stacks and everything, it just sounded so cohesive, and it sounded like the soul, it sounded like a heart. It no longer sounded like a song, really. Like when you really like pay attention to the actual tone, the way the music is talking, then you're gonna hear the difference. Even if you don't hear it, you're gonna feel it, trust me. All right, so cool, let's leave that right there on the lead vocal. And then after that, another thing I like to use it for is the background vocals. And you know, let's bypass it in and out. The background vocals were important. The background vocals were driving the song. So, you know, being an engineer, you gotta also understand, you gotta listen to the music first, you know, just the basic stuff, and be like, you know, what is the highlight here? Like, what is the main thing that's gonna drive the song? What's gonna drive the boat? What's gonna drive the bus? You gotta pick the driver. You know, you gotta pick which sound is going to be in the passenger seat and which sound is going to be in the driver's seat. So I picked this time for actually the background vocals to be driving the song. Sometimes it might be the lead vocal. It could be either way or, but you always got to like kind of think about that too. Like everywhere got to get into fitting, you know, everything's got to fit into the car, you know, which is kind of like the whole song, you know.
I'm going crazy, toting 380. People told me just to tell you still a little baby, but I got zombies in the trap, them boys not patient. Nigga, you a bitch, you keep pump faking. They say, bro, keep doing you. I be vibing every day. I know niggas niggas want me out, tryna take me out again. They wanna take away my name, they don't want me get the fame. They say, J-Man, if you get it, they feel like I'm just gon' change. They let me out of the chains, now I told them I'ma change. They don't want me making no move, now they want me out of it. Now they say you losing it, they say I fed off my shit, but I'm back counting racks, and I'm better than ever. I thought we was forever, you said we was together. You changed, you lied, now I'm by my lonely.
It's just something that Tube does, like, especially in the high end, the way the high end breaks up, it sounds more emotional. It really helps, like, the emotional impact of the song. Like, just listen to especially that drop. You know, when I bypassed it, it still felt great. Of course, it still felt great, but that 1% was missing from making it a real relatable moment. Like, let's listen to it right here, right now.
Counting racks, and I'm better than ever. I thought we was forever, you said we was together. You changed, you lied. Racks, and I'm better than ever. I thought we was forever, you said we was together. You changed.
So it's just really something about it. Like, just that's the main thing about saturation. It's like the human element. That's what I was trying to talk about in the beginning with the microphones and everything. Because now you hear like it's just that extra 1% that makes you feel it. And even if you like, okay, you know, with the saturation, it's just like that smoothness of the high end, the way it works. You know, it does something to the lower mid, gives it a little bit of body, a little bit of the beef, the weight, but it also gives it a little bit of sparkle. That's what tubes do as well. Like the CL1B gives a little bit of sparkle. You know, LA2A can give a little bit of brightness as well, you know, because they add even order harmonics and everything like that. So yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So yeah, this is a great plugin. I love this a lot. All right, next thing that I was just using this you know, plugin for and everything like that with the BB tubes, I was using it parallel compression. And let's pay attention to, you know, this tube kind of reminds me, the compression kind of reminds me of Veramute compression, just on the default preset, because it has a slow attack and slow release. So even like the first compressors too were tubes as well, and those Veramute compressors like Fairchild's pretty slow, the Abbey Road RS124, you know, those compressors were always pretty slow. That's just the nature of Veramute compression. So I'm not necessarily sure if the tube is doing the compression, if it's actual true tube compression, but either way, it sounded great. And I put it on the Smash as well. So, you know, the difference between that is with the Smash, it has a faster attack and release, you know, and everything like that. So it's pretty good. You also got to pay attention to the tempo of the music when you're doing your parallel compression, because if the parallel compression is not being responsive enough to like the lead vocal and it's being blended back in, it's going to kind of feel like you put a 50-pound backpack on top of the lead vocal. Now it's going to be a little bit sluggish and, you know, the way it's moving and everything like that. So let's listen to it real quick. Let's go.
They wanna take away my name, they don't want me get the fame. They say, J-Man, if you get it, they feel like I'm just gon' change. They let me out of the chains, now I told them I'ma change. They don't want me making no move, now they want me out of it. Now they say you losing it, they say I fed off my shit, but I'm back counting racks, and I'm better than ever. I thought we was forever, you said we was together. You changed, you lied, now I'm by my lonely.
All right, so yeah, that's pretty interesting. The parallel compression just gives it a lot of presence, and you kind of see that meter kind of moving. It's keeping up, but usually if it was a song where the tempo was a lot faster, that would be a tough situation, because you know, if it was like 150, the person was rapping a little bit faster, I probably wouldn't have been able to do that. So that's something that you got to also understand, like the tempo in the parallel compression, how it's bumping and grooving and moving. You know, mixing is kind of like a marathon. You know, once you start to get into that groove, you can't stop. You know, once somebody's been running a marathon for an hour, you think you can jump in front of them and say, hey, stop right there, slow down a little bit. No, because they're already in the groove. So when you're mixing, you shouldn't really be thinking about this stuff too much, you know, but you should always keep it in the back of your mind, you know, because once you get in that rhythm, once you get in that vibe, you just got to go. I heard the tube channel strip, it sounded great, so I just kept going and going and going and took it to the finish line. So you pay attention when I take out the parallel compression. It sounds like I lose some presence. It sounds like the vocal just left the car, like it's no longer inside of the environment. It sounds like it just left the classroom. It's no longer present anymore. So that's the good thing about parallel compression. It brings in presence, density, you know, and a lot of you know, weight and tone, you know, that I like a lot here. And the last thing that I was using this for is a little bit of parallel saturation distortion on my whole mix bus. I really like the tubes because now you start to hear a little bit more of the air. You know, what the tubes do, as well as they add some more like, you know, seasoning, you know, salt and pepper to like the upper register of the whole mix. So now the reverb becomes a little bit more audible. Now the delay and everything becomes a little bit more audible. Everything just becomes more audible now. And, you know, let's listen to that as well.
They don't want me get the fame. They say, J-Man, if you get it, they feel like I'm just gon' change. They let me out of the chains. Now I told them I'ma change. They don't want me making no more. Now they want me out of it. Now they say you losing it. They say I fed off my shit, but I'm back counting racks, and I'm better than ever. I thought we was forever. You said we was together. You changed, you lied. Now I'm by my lonely.
So you got to pay attention. Now that I brought in that a little bit of that parallel saturation using the drive, a little bit of compression too. Now like you can hear the sustain. Like I know you hear it. I'm going to play it back again, but you hear the sustain. You hear the tail of the reverb and the way it's kind of like this, like, you know, breaking up and everything like that. So saturation, that's a gem, you know, and it's always a better situation. I like to mix into like the saturation because that's going to make me apply less reverb, less delay. That's what I'm always trying to do, you know, and the main thing I always like to do that is because when you start reverberating your lows and you start dampening up, you start washing everything away, you kind of lose this solidity, you kind of lose this foundation that you're building the mix on, you know, depending on where that reverb is being done. Like if you have a lead vocal and the reverb is down the middle, right? So it's kind of like that mid channel is starting to get washed away. It's like you're taking a cloth and you're starting to put it, you know, in that laundry detergent and everything like that, you know, that mark that the vocal is leaving on the track is starting to get washed away because, you know, when you reverberate the lows too much, that's what happens. But saturation, you know, helps you make the reverb, delay, everything audible. You can hear everything clearly. Now you can use less delay, less reverb, and now you can have everything just sound more solid, more stronger. You know what I mean? So let's keep listening.
Bitch, you keep pump faking. They say, bro, keep doing you. I be vibing every day. I know niggas want me out, trying to take me out again. They wanna take away my name. They don't want me get the fame. They say, J-Man, if you get it, they feel like I'm just gon' change. They let me out of the chains. Now I told them I'ma change. They don't want me making no more. Now they want me out of it. Now they say you losing it. They say I fed off my shit, but I'm back counting racks, and I'm better than ever. I thought we was forever. You said we was together. You changed, you lied. Now I'm by my loan.
So that's what tubes are all about. You know, it's not just, oh, it's just a tube. You know, it's about the life. That's what all of these tools are. You have to understand how can you use these tools like a painter, you know, to paint the image that you wanted to come off across. You hear how he's singing, you hear his lyrics. I had to come in there and mix it as in a way to make those lyrics really come out. Like all of that stuff. You got to think about all that stuff, you know, trying to bring that out because that was the main highlight of this song is the emotion and the lyrics and everything like that. But the ways BB Tube, it just provided an unreal clarity. It provided me with clarity, all the benefits of clarity and sparkliness without using something like boosting EQ, where, you know, sometimes you start using boosting EQ, you start to fatigue your ears because you're also boosting like all of the frequencies in the rest of the neighborhood. You know, the frequency spectrum is like a neighborhood. There's other people that live around, you know, you can't just boost 16K, you know, like that. There's also going to be like around 14, 13, you know, everything else in the neighborhood is going to get boosted up as well. So yeah, that's pretty much the end of the video that I have today. You know, this brand new plugin, I love it. It sounds so crispy for the vocals, just getting it to sound mainstream and great. If you guys do have any more questions, go ahead and drop it down below. I'm more than happy to get to it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.